Hi, Jesus Seekers. This is Matthew Taylor, and I'm your host for today's episode of the Seeking Our God podcast. All right, let's get ready to seek Jesus and be aware what the Spirit is teaching us. Today we continue our dive into Psalm 91. Yesterday we looked at verses 1 through 4. Today we will look at verses 5 through 10. Starting in verse 5. You will not be afraid of the terror by night, or of the arrow that flies by day, of the pestilence that stalks in darkness, or of the destruction that lays waste at noon. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not approach you. You will only look on with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. For you have made the Lord my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil will befall you, nor will any plague come near your tent. So let's start first with a few key takeaways that we will look at during our discussion. First, there is no limit to God's protection. Second, God is our security when we are afraid. Third, we can rest with confidence that whatever happens on earth is within His knowledge. So let's work through these verses to understand better what the psalmist is saying. Verses 5 to 6. As a result of God's help, as seen in verses 3 and 4, the one who trusts in the Lord will not fear or be afraid of the terror at night or the attack by day that includes pestilence or plague. You can see that in verse 5 and 6. The night can allude to a sneak attack by enemies in the darkness of night. Cross-reference Psalm 3:8. In verses 5 to 7, we see the protection of God extends to both day and night. The interplay of words for day and night in these verses indicates the universal nature of God's protection. There is no limit to His protection, for He has full authority over all things that happen on earth. The greatness of God's protection is further amplified by the ratio of 1,000 or even 10,000 to 1. We see that in verse 7. We also see that in Joshua 23:10. The Lord gives security from all natural and supernatural causes of fear, whether war or disease. The words terror, arrow, pestilence, and destruction collectively refer to evil in general. These afflictions came on the wicked as expressions of God's provocation. You can see that in Psalm 53:5. But those who fear the Lord need not be afraid of the arrow that brings diseases, or pestilence and plague in verse 6, whether in broad daylight or in the darkness of the night, also seen in Psalm 121:5 and 6. I do want to point out in verse 6 where we read about pestilence and disease or destruction in NASB, the NET Bible describes this as being associated to siege warfare on the population of a surrounded city, which is especially susceptible to the outbreak of epidemics. In verses 7 to 8, destruction that might lay thousands in defeat will not affect a trusting believer. Rather, they will look or see on with their eyes and see the wicked destroyed. In reference to the 1,000 and 10,000, this is possibly a reference to the Israelites in Egypt who were spared the danger that surrounded them. You can see this also in Exodus 9:26, Exodus 10:23, and Exodus 11:7. The verse shows that the believers are protected from any assault. The look and see in verse 8 describes the punishment of the wicked is as sure as the deliverance of the righteous. The two verses show the reader that seeing God's salvation with the eye of faith will further encourage believers to whom God has promised His protection and blessing. Christians will witness the righteousness, justice, and faithfulness of the Lord as well as the punishment of the wicked. Please note, I'm not saying this virus is a punishment on the wicked. The punishment referred here in these verses could be any time in this earthly life. In verses 9 to 10, the psalmist explained that no evil or harm or plague, also disaster, can befall those who have made the Lord their refuge. The word there for refuge means shelter from danger. We saw that in verse 2. There is some interesting wording in verses 9 to 10 that we should note here. Later on in verses 14 to 16, God describes directly the same person addressed by the psalmist in verses 9 through 13. This person is the coming one. We will talk more about this on the last day of the psalm, but there is a messianic thrust in this poem. We also see the psalmist reiterate a couple of important reminders here. My refuge is repeated again from verse 2. Dwelling place is the same word used in Psalm 90, verse 1. One reason why some believe the anonymous psalmist of chapter 91 is Moses. Even if the psalmist is not Moses, it is still an important truth the writer is preaching to themselves. Most High is employed again from verse 1. The psalmist's personal experience serves as an encouragement to embrace the way of wisdom by making the Most High our dwelling place and making our faith in the Faithful One. God is the dwelling of his people, under whose shelter they find refuge. Here's the key. The Lord does not guarantee that no evil will befall those who trust him. Quote unquote, make the Most High your dwelling. This pretty much says in these verses that you will have trouble, and when you do, you should seek God. When we do find rest in God, our refuge, we will rest with confidence that whatever happens on earth is with his knowledge. There's nothing that happens outside of his will, whether harm, which literally means evil in verse 10, or disaster, literally disease or wound. We can cross-reference that in Psalm 38:11, Leviticus 13:14, Isaiah 53:8. From all of this, we see that no power in heaven or on earth is greater than that of Yahweh, the divine leader and protector. There is a simple truth from all of this, that there is no kind of calamity which the shield of God cannot prevent and repel. So that does it for today. Let's go back, remember our takeaways and lessons from this reading. 3 main things. There's no limit to God's protection. God is our security when we are afraid. And we can rest with confidence that whatever happens on earth is within his knowledge. Thank you for joining us today on the Seeking Our God podcast. Be sure to join us next time, and please subscribe to our podcast as well. Have a great day.